MJ's catchphrase here is remarkably similar to my senior quote. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 27th movie in the MCU, Marvel's 2021 superhero film, Spider-Man No Way Home. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All of my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Spider-Man No Way Home stars Tom Holland, Zendaya, and Benedict Cumberbatch, and was directed by John Watts. It tells the story of Peter Parker, played by Tom Holland, who enlists magical help after a life-altering revelation, only to find that his intervention has even more dangerous and life-altering consequences. It's been a little while since we had a big event movie. The MCU is certainly no stranger to fulfilling that role, but it took a while this year. Spider-Man No Way Home is the fourth MCU film of 2021, and the fourth of Phase 4 of the MCU. Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals all performed decently at the box office, and all generated the expected MCU conversation and buzz, but none of them came close to No Way Home. There are a lot of reasons for this, ranging from character recognition and popularity to time of the year, but there's no doubt that this was an event movie. Although the story and significance are quite different, the hype and experience with this film really reminded me of Avengers Endgame. The blinders that we all had to put on to avoid spoilers, the incredible amount of audience interaction at the theater, and just the grand comic book escape of it all. Spider-Man No Way Home is a lot of things, but just like its two Spidey MCU predecessors, first and foremost, it's a fun film. It carries on the witty, playful tone of Homecoming and Far From Home, while continuing to derive humor from the dichotomy between Peter's life as a teenager and his heroic responsibilities as Spider-Man. For the most part, I find the Holland Spider-Man films to be very entertaining and pretty funny as well. All three have had jokes that fell very flat, but the banter and interactions that aren't explicitly played for jokes are funny. Of course, humor isn't the only thing that makes Spider-Man fun. We've also got his powers and web-slinging antics. And the action here is surprisingly great. It does get a tad CG heavy at times, but it's mostly creatively designed, and actually gets much more brutal than we've come to expect from this iteration of Spider-Man. Up to this point, the general story of the MCU Spider-Man films have revolved around balancing life as a normal teenager and life as a superhero. This film still has elements of that, but given that this movie picks up right where Far From Home left off, life as a normal teen isn't really a viable option for Peter anymore. So, the story here has to shift focus from what we've seen in the past. And it's quite the story, becoming something fairly complex, but still easy to follow, at least for fans of the Spider-Man movies. The setup for the plot is admittedly a little convoluted. It makes sense in the sense that it acts as a fitting catalyst, but it involves characters making some surprisingly dumb decisions. Now, that's not necessarily out of character for Spider-Man, but it kind of is for another character who's involved. Luckily, once we're past the forced feeling setup, the story swings along, sometimes wildly, sometimes randomly, but always entertainingly. Now, the plot that we get is inherently very interesting, but it would not be nearly as entertaining or impactful if it weren't for the nostalgia. So this element of the movie is hugely important, but it would be enormously spoilery to talk about. I went into this movie only having seen the first trailer, and managing to avoid spoilers, so I want to extend that same opportunity to you. So I'm going to be very vague here. If you've seen the film, you'll know what things I'm talking about, and if you haven't, this shouldn't take away from the awe and excitement of this film's revelations. So, just based on that first trailer, I was expecting a good dose of nostalgia here, but I gotta say, it was far more satisfying than I thought it would be. The fan service here is off the charts, but I think it really worked, because you get kind of two levels with it. The first level is inherent to the premise, and it was both blatantly shown and hinted at in the trailer. But then you've got this second level that emerges later in the film that's just so joy and smile inducing. That second level is easily my favorite aspect of this film, and I have a feeling I'm not alone in that opinion. Although nostalgia is certainly this film's biggest asset, pleasantly, it's also a fairly thematically strong film. Spider-Man movies have always centered around lessons and morality, but we haven't had one this impactful since Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. With our current iteration of Spider-Man, we've seen a character who's always had guidance and help. In Homecoming, that came in the form of direct mentorship by Tony Stark. In Far From Home, Peter was still existing in Stark's shadow, recklessly seeking out a surrogate mentor. No Way Home does feature Doctor Strange, in a role that initially seems like it's going to be along those same lines, but really, this is the film where we finally see Peter kind of on his own, stepping into a more independent role without that mentor oversight. And this film, while being very fun, also gets pretty dark and heavy. It's got some emotional heft to it, and deals with anonymity, sacrifice, and the immutable nature of fate. I think it's safe to say that No Way Home breaks the Spider-Man 3 curse. This was a fun, emotionally poignant, and incredibly satisfying film that manages to live up to its hype. It's hoisted up by nostalgia and connections that fans of any Spider-Man movie will enjoy, but even without that nostalgia, it's still got an interesting and creative story. It does something new with the MCU Spider-Man movies, and takes things in a different direction that sets up for a lot of potential paths moving forward with the franchise. Say what you will about the MCU, and about event movies in general, but this was a great theatrical experience. And certainly a movie experience I never could have imagined ever coming to fruition. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one has gotta be the nostalgia. Like I said before, this nostalgia element largely deals with things that would be considered spoilers, so I've gotta be vague here, but man was it all satisfying. I know that many people hate it when films lean heavily into nostalgia or references and connections to other films. While this one has legitimate reasoning for doing so, given its plot, it is undeniably fan service heavy. Perhaps one of the most nostalgia-based films in recent memory. But since I like and have investment in the films it was leaning so heavily into, I didn't mind at all. The way this film was able to incorporate these nostalgic elements was wonderful, balancing both the fun and emotional sides of what their inclusion entailed. Pro number two is the humor. Now, I'll admit that a good chunk of this humor ties into my first pro, so many of my favorite humorous parts of this film I can't even discuss in a spoiler-free review, but suffice it to say, they stem from interactions and banter between characters. Like every MCU film, this one does have some forced jokes that fall flat, especially during the first act, but I did enjoy the frequent sarcasm as well as the more subtly humorous moments. The third pro has to be the themes. Of all of the superheroes out there, Spider-Man has always been one of the most relatable characters, because in addition to being an arachnid-based superhero, he's also just an average kid. So even though the themes from Captain America movies or a Superman movie can be understood and applied to our own lives, there's always something extra down-to-earth to Spidey movie messages. Raimi's first two Spider-Man films still reign supreme on this front, but this is easily the most thematically strong MCU Spider-Man film, dealing with darker and more emotionally mature issues than we've previously seen in the franchise. On the con side, the biggest issue is the setup during the first act. It's not awful, it's pretty entertaining, and from a plot device perspective, does logically set up for what's to come later in the film. But from a character perspective, it just feels so convoluted and exceedingly dumb in an out-of-character kind of way. This was something that stood out to me even in the first trailer, and I had hoped it would make more sense in the context of the film, but it really doesn't. Con number two is how overstuffed this film feels at times. Because of what this movie does with its premise, it has to incorporate a lot of things. There are a lot of concepts, a lot of interweaving story threads, and a lot of characters. A lot. And it's this character component where the overstuffed nature comes through a bit. Now, we're not talking Spider-Man 3 levels of villain bloat here, but this film could have cut out a few characters without significantly altering anything important. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Spider-Man No Way Home or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Spider-Man No Way Home 4 out of 5 paws. Apparently, that's a bit of a trend here for me with the Spider-Man movies, but this was a thoroughly enjoyable film with an interesting story, plenty of emotion and fun, and a huge dose of nostalgia. I would recommend Spider-Man No Way Home to fans of Spider-Man. I realize that might sound obvious and a bit generic, but trust me, if there's ever been a film for fans of Spidey, this is it. No matter what era of Spider-Man you like, you're gonna find something to enjoy here. That said, people who don't have any investment in the character or haven't watched any of the multitude of previous Spider-Man movies will likely be a bit confused here, and certainly won't experience the full magnitude of this film. If you liked Spider-Man No Way Home, I would recommend Spider-Man Far From Home. As the second of the MCU Spider-Man movies, it's this film's immediate predecessor. There are some important direct story connections between the two films, and Far From Home also offers us our first taste of a slightly more independent Spider-Man, something we see expanded upon here in this movie. If you want some more Spider-Man, I've gotta recommend Spider-Man 2. This is another thematically strong Spidey story, plus there are some other important connections. And if you still can't get enough Spider-Man, you should check out Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's an animated film, but don't let that fool you. It's right up there with some of its live-action counterparts. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Spider-Man No Way Home? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's a movie that heavily relies on nostalgia that you think really worked? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.